The curse of the 2-goal lead has been lifted. Please let it have been lifted. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken, for the first time this season, win their second game in a row, beating the Nashville Predators 4-2. And for those that aren't math majors out there, you will notice that 4-2 is a 2-goal lead that the Kraken won the game with. Now, why is that such a big deal, you might ask? Isn't a 2-goal lead better than a 1-goal lead, and don't teams win by 2 all the time? Well, yes, and yes, but in the 4-game road trip that the Kraken just got back from, this being their first game at home, they had 2-goal leads in all 4 of those games. A 3-1 lead in Detroit to lead it off, and then 2-0 leads in all 3 of the next 4 games. And while they did, yes, end up winning 2 of those games, both of those happened in overtime, so in all 4 situations, they managed to blow those 2-goal leads. So even though when they took the 2-goal lead in this game, making it 4-2 in the third, it was later in the game than they had any of those 2-goal leads, I think I can be forgiven for being a little bit nervous about how the last 10 to 11 minutes of this game were going to go. And while yes, in the last couple of minutes while the net was empty, I was hoping that somebody would hit it, specifically Matty Beniers, so he can finally get his season going and break whatever curse seems to be on him. But in the end, it might have been a good thing that the Kraken win by 2, just to give that little extra hope that that curse of the 2-goal lead for the Kraken here early on the season is a thing of the past. And so with them winning by 2, I'm just going to go ahead and say that the curse is lifted, it's over, speak it into existence, and we can move on. Moving on then into the game itself, there are no changes in the Kraken lineup coming into the game, which yes, does mean that Grubauer is starting his second straight after Decord started the first 3 of the road trip. And once again, Grubauer was fantastic in net for the Kraken in this one. And while we are all still very happy with how Decord has been playing to this point in the season, Grubauer has been at least almost as good, if not as good as Decord. And don't look now, but both Kraken goaltenders have save percentages above 900. Something that we couldn't say about any Kraken goaltender in their first 2 seasons. So hopefully that continues. Either way, at the moment, we've got 2 goaltenders here in Seattle that we can feel good about going into the net in any given night. It's a good problem to have. A problem that isn't so good to have is what the Kraken faced early on in this game, though, as it wasn't long before Tolvanen headed to the box, and Tolvanen clearly was feeling some kind of way playing against his old team in this game. This was not the start he probably wanted to get off to, though, as he gets called for a trip. It was an obvious trip. Goes to the box, and towards the end of the kill with about 30 seconds left in it, there's a play around the net, and Larson's stick, I don't know if it gets lifted or if he's just trying to get it around a guy. Either way, he catches another Nashville player up high, knocks out a couple of teeth, and gets himself put in the box for 4 minutes. The Kraken managed to kill off the 32 seconds, I think it was, of 5-on-3, and then do get some help killing off a good chunk of the remainder of the Larson double minor when Dumoulin gets tripped up behind the Kraken net, sending us to 4-on-4. But unfortunately, coming out of that 4-on-4, there's still about 20 seconds left of Nashville power play, and in the final seconds of that, they get down into the Kraken end, and it's just a beautiful passing play. High to low, back up to the middle of the slot, and into the net before Grubauer has any chance to react. It's a tic-tac-toe pass, and Nashville's on the board first. Then, a few minutes later, the parade into the penalty boxes that this first period was continues as the Kraken are going to get their first shot at the power play. Yeah, they had the penalty earlier, but it was 4-on-4 the entire way, so the Kraken never really got a power play out of it. But it's Beniers who gets tripped by Fabro, and I specifically call it those 2 because it's going to come up again. And while this power play for the Kraken does actually look pretty good, they get set up, at least the first unit gets set up in the offensive end and gets a few chances off on net. They aren't able to score. Not long after it comes to an end, though, they get another chance on the power plays. Once again, it's Fabro getting an offense against Beniers, this time for a slash. Fabro to the box, very frustrated, and Beniers back to the power play with the Kraken. Actually, sorry, quick correction. The first penalty of Fabro on Beniers was interference. The second one was a slash, so I got that one right. Either way, the Kraken, for the second time in a short period of time, are back on the power play because Fabro just can't stay away from Beniers. The second power play for the Kraken, though, unlike the first one, just never really has a chance to get going. The first unit can't get established in the offensive end. They have a hard time getting back in the offensive end once they're out of it. The second unit does eventually get back into the offensive end and set up, but they're just not really able to get the puck to the net until eventually Oliver Bjorkstrand skating around looking for a window to shoot way up by the blue line, fires off a shot, and it's in! Bjorkstrand's shot finds the perfect spot in the top corner, actually hitting the corner, both the crossbar and post, I'm pretty sure, and then bouncing down into the net to give the Kraken the power play goal and tie things back up at 1. And also worth mentioning on this goal, not only if it had been just an inch to the outside or an inch higher, it would have bounced out, but also the only way that this really goes in the first place, and I think this is what Bjorkstrand was looking for the entire time, was Wennberg screening out in front. And just as Saros leans out to the side, which you can see in the screenshot here, leans out to one side of Wennberg to try and see Bjorkstrand's shot, that's when Bjorkstrand fires off the shot to the other side, again finding that top corner and tying the game. So although because of how assists work, it's Schultz and McCann that get the 2 assists on this Bjorkstrand goal, it's really Wennberg that has the biggest impact in this goal happening in the first place, outside of Bjorkstrand, who does have the perfect laser shot to that top corner. Following the game-tying goal, though, the Predators do press back over the next little bit, trying to regain the lead for themselves in what was, outside of all the penalties, a pretty sloppy period for the Kraken, all things considered. Fortunately, the Predators aren't able to get another goal in this period, and actually, against the flow of play, just 2 minutes later, 2 minutes and 20 seconds later to be exact, the Kraken get a rush chance back the other way as Gord makes a beautiful stick check and intercept of a pass in the Kraken defensive end. It turns into a 2-on-1 the other way. It's Gord with the puck, McCann on the far side, and just to add in a little extra something to some of you in particular, I remember you from the first season who were not the biggest Jeremy Lauzon fans, Lauzon is the one defender back for the Predators. And on the 2-on-1 rush, well, Gord does end up doing the thing that I've been saying over the last few games I wish the Kraken would do less of on these rushes, and goes for the pass to McCann. Fortunately, it ends up working out as Lauzon goes to try to break up the pass, isn't able to, it gets under his stick, right out to McCann, and if that pass does get through, it does increase the chances of scoring, especially when it goes to a guy like Jared McCann. He buries it into the back of the net to give the Kraken the 2-1 lead. So yes, obviously, passing on a 2-on-1 rush can work, and actually, if you can get the pass through, it does increase your chances of scoring rather than just taking the shot. The problem is it isn't going to get through more often than not. Fortunately, Lauzon is, I guess, a double agent for the Kraken here. To be perfectly honest, Lauzon actually had a pretty good game other than this one instance, but it gets through Lauzon. McCann scores his 6th of the season, and the Kraken take the lead that they would hold into the first intermission. Now, at this point, of course, because we didn't know what the outcome would be yet, it is somewhat comforting to know, given how the Kraken had been blowing those 2-goal leads throughout the road trip, that the way that they got this 2-1 score was not by scoring twice and then getting scored on, in which case you knew Nashville was going to score next. Instead, they got scored on first and then scored twice, so they never had that multi-goal lead, and they can continue to ride this lead the rest of the game if need be. And if you really like giving into superstition, or at least entertaining it anyway, it may very well have been that fact that kept the Predators from scoring throughout the first half of the second period. As if I did have one complaint about how the Kraken played in this game, it would be that they really didn't play a fantastic first 30 minutes of hockey. Now, obviously, they scored twice, they took advantage of a rush chance and looked good on a couple of power plays, or looked good on one power play and scored on another. Other than that, though, at the very least, it certainly didn't look like the team that we saw in Tampa Bay, with the crisp passing and clean transitions through the neutral zone and the ability to get set up in the offensive end on, well, regularly and then stay there once they were set up. They were able to get to the offensive zone every now and then. It's not like the Predators were just constantly in the Kraken end of the ice or anything. It was just kind of a sloppy played game all around that was slightly leaning the Nashville way for most of the first 30 minutes of the game. And even with that being said, outside of a couple of rush chances that the Kraken get here in the middle part of the second period, one for Beniers and one for Wennberg, if I'm not mistaken, both of which Saros makes saves on. He's one of the best goaltenders in the NHL, so that's not a terribly big surprise. Honestly, this entire second period was pretty sloppy from the Kraken. I mean, sure, at least through the back half of the second period, even if the Kraken couldn't get much going, they were able to prevent the Predators from getting much going themselves, at least at 5-on-5 anyway. The problem was, in the final 5 minutes of this second period, the Predators spent most of it on the power play. The first one comes off of a Borgen hold that honestly seemed like a bit of a soft call, but at the same time, the officials did show you in the first period that they were going to call this one pretty tightly, and even if you often see things like this or even more egregious than this not get called, it was, by the letter of the law, definitely a hold. So Borgen goes to the box, and while Grubauer and the penalty kill do a good job for the majority of this power play of killing it off, but eventually the Predators demonstrate why they've seemingly always been a team that seems to prefer defensemen over forwards, almost to the point where you wonder if they wish they could ice 20 defensemen instead of having forwards at all. I mean, they'd probably like having Forsberg still, so we'll call it 19-1. I mean, after all, this is the team that a couple of years ago in the Seattle expansion draft protected 5 defensemen and 3 forwards. And there's also not a ton of teams that run 2 defensemen on the power play, but that's what they do here so that they can have Roman Josi out there. And sure enough, it's Josi with the one-timer that beats Grubauer over the pad and under the glove to tie the game at 2. So maybe it didn't matter how the Kraken got that 2-1 lead. They just don't like having 2 goals and a lead. But then, just as those nerves and anxieties are starting to creep in and really grab a hold of the Kraken, letting another lead slip away and maybe letting another game slip away, especially against a team that, if they think they're a playoff team, they should be beating, especially at home. Just as all that's starting to come back, sweet relief as the Kraken get back into the offensive end, and just 24 seconds later, it's Brian Dumoulin skating up, firing off a shot, and putting it over the blocker hand of Saros into the back of the net to give the Kraken back the lead, just like that. For Dumoulin, it's his second of the season and second in 2 games. Actually, the first time in his career that he's scored in back-to-back games, and he's had a pretty good long career with a lot of success along the way. I mean, he's never been a huge goal scorer, but been on some good teams. Either way, he gets the goal, and again, just like was the case with Wemberg on that goal for Bjorkstrand to start things off on the power play in the first period, this one, even if not officially, is in essence assisted by Ty Cartier standing in front of the net, screening Saros, and this time Saros doesn't even have to peek out the other side before Dumoulin puts it past him. He just can't see the shot coming in the first place with Cartier standing right there. And so for the Kraken, well, like I just said a little bit ago, they certainly hadn't played their best game at 5-on-5 to this point and had already allowed their opponents to get 4 power plays and were about to give them a 5th. They were at least doing a good job of getting net front presence, not just one, but actually multiple guys out in front of the net when they did have these chances in the offensive end. It's straight up the reason that they have 2 of their 3 goals already at this point in the game, and is very important against goaltenders like Saros, because while I strongly believe that Saros is one of the top 10 certainly, but maybe even top 5 goaltenders in the league, if you take away his eyes, he's just as good as any other guy in that net. Well, that's all well and good, though. It would be kind of nice if the Kraken could not give the Predators a chance to tie things right back up with 2 minutes left in the period by giving them a power play after having just taken the lead back. But that's just what happens, and it's actually a tripping call against Philip Grubauer on a play that could have been a whole lot worse than a late period power play for the opponent. As Grubauer sticks out his leg to make a save and shut down a rush chance, it ends up tripping the guy that was coming in. That's obviously what leads to the call, but also on the play, Grubauer takes a long time to get up from it, as after getting hit in the leg, he kind of awkwardly spins around and then ends up behind the Kraken net on his hands and knees, and again, it's a long time before he eventually gets up and slowly makes his way to the Kraken bench, which I think is perfectly understandable considering, well, heck, just doing the splits in the first place seems painful to me, much less having one of your legs be run into by a professional athlete on skates while you're doing them. So great, fantastic. Here we go again with another early season goaltender injury for the Kraken, just as it seems like they finally have 2 guys that are off to a hot start to the season, and they have a good tandem thing going between the 2 of them that should keep them fresh deep into it. Nope, freak accident, guy runs into Grubauer's leg, and we're right back to Decord having to shoulder the entire weight of the season. I mean, sure, they still have Drieger at the AHL level that they can bring up, and as far as third goaltenders go, that's probably not a bad option, but you don't know because he hasn't really played in the NHL in, well, almost 2 years now. But fortunately, that isn't going to have to be the case. As it turns out, Grubauer is able to collect himself and get back into the net for this penalty kill to end out the second period during the commercial break. At the very least, you hope that he's good to go and not just forcing himself to think he's good to go and just make whatever potential injury this is worse. But if there had been an injury after that collision for him to make worse by coming right back into the game, he certainly would have done it with the spectacular diving splits toe save that he makes on a rebound just as this power play gets started. A shot from the slot comes right down, he makes that initial save, but then the rebound goes right out to the side where there's a Predator waiting to collect it, gets the second shot off, but Grubauer right back into the splits after just having run into a player, having his leg run into in that same position, gets right back down, full splits inside of both pads down on the ice, gets the toe to the puck to keep it out of the net, and then with the help of Larson is able to clean up that second rebound as well before that can be whacked in over his pad. The Kraken, with that spectacular save, survive that and the rest of this power play and do get to the end of the second with still holding that 3-2 lead. And then as we get into the third, well, I still wouldn't say that the Kraken were playing their best in this third period. It was, I would say, the best period that they played in this game, and at the very least, they were able to lock things down defensively and really didn't give Nashville much to try to even things up as this period goes along. And eventually, they even extend the lead off of a one faceoff in the offensive end. It's Wennberg with the faceoff win out to Schwartz. Schwartz up to Dunn. Dunn handles it once, bringing it a little bit closer to the center, but doesn't take long before he fires off a shot at the net, which beats Saros clean, an absolute laser over the pad and under the glove to give the Kraken the 2-goal 4-2 lead. And you know what? With this goal, I gotta say, man, is it nice to see the Kraken win these big important faceoffs more consistently and get opportunities like this. Sure, we saw the Kraken get a goal or two here and there over the course of all of last season off of one faceoffs in the offensive end, but it certainly happened against them far more frequently. And this season, while it's happened both ways, it seems like it's a lot more even. Happens for both teams, and it's not a massive disadvantage that the Kraken are constantly at whenever there's a face-off in really either end of the ice. And of course, right here with this goal from Dunn, we see a perfect example of the advantage that being able to win face-offs a little bit more frequently gives this team. A difference that, again, can be easily traced back to the addition of Belmar in the offseason. Getting back to the game, though, although there still are 11 minutes, actually a little over 11 minutes left in it after this goal goes in, so still plenty of time for Nashville to come back and tie it, they never really are given an opportunity to do so, partially because the Kraken spend 4 of those 11 minutes on the power play, which they really don't do much of anything with other than use it as 4 minutes of killed clock, basically. But they really don't let Nashville into the offensive end and set up until they do eventually pull the goaltender with about a minute and a half left in the game. The Kraken do get one chance potentially at the empty net as Wennberg has the puck, getting it all the way into the offensive end, but it's defended well by the Predators, so he never gets the shot off. Either way, the Kraken, with one more very nice save from Grubauer, do hold that 4-2 lead to the final buzzer and win this game, their second in a row. 4-2, getting to 10 points on the season. So 10% of where they finished last season. The end then with this game, was it a perfect one for the Kraken? No, certainly not. In fact, I would go so far as to say they've actually played a couple of their losses better than they played this game, especially those first 2 periods that were pretty sloppy. At the very least, they were able to play well defensively to make up for some of that sloppiness in transition and in the offensive end. And they were able to take advantage of a good number of the chances that they got in the offensive end, thanks in large part to that very good net front presence that they were able to establish. So while there definitely are some things for the team to clean up coming out of this game against the Predators, at the very least they did enough to get these 2 points in the standings, take care of business against a team that I really feel like they probably should be beating at home at this point, especially with needing to get points in the standings after the slow start. And there were some things they did well in this game as well, like the net front presence that helped get them those 2 goals, as well as, honestly, I think they played pretty well defensively in their end of the ice, even if they put themselves in situations where they had to do that a little bit too much. Plus, there's always the fantastic goaltending that they're getting from really both of their netminders at this point, things that they can hopefully build off of, or at the very least maintain throughout the majority of the rest of the season. And certainly when it comes to this next game on Saturday against a Flames team that has had a nightmare start to the season, and for the Kraken, especially at home. These are 2 points that they absolutely have to have in an effort to not fall any farther behind some of the teams at the top of the division, like the Golden Knights certainly, who are just running away with things, but even the Kings and Canucks, who have also gotten off to good starts. And finally, before we close things out, we still have 3 Kraken stars to hand out. As always, the Kraken 3 stars this season are brought to you by the supporters over on Patreon. If you do want to help support this channel a little bit more than you already are by watching this video, there's a link to the Patreon down below. With that, you'll be able to help decide the Kraken 3 stars, or in some cases, if there are 3 stars, which there certainly will be in this game, after every game. And in this one, the first star, I'm not going to disagree with Patreon. I'm going with Philip Grubauer. He was fantastic in net for the Kraken. Obviously, that massive save coming right off of the collision, going right back down into the splits after being run into in that same position, which, you know, thankfully, Grubauer is a lot more flexible than I am, because I would have been straight up broken just going to the splits in the first place. Either way, fantastic game from Grubauer, and it's nice to see those 900 plus save percentages for both goaltenders. I've mentioned it a few times, but yeah, it's been a long time coming. My second star for the Kraken in this one is going to be Brian Dumoulin, in part because I got close to giving him a star in the last one and ultimately didn't. And then he comes back and scores again in this game, ultimately the game-winning goal. Not that I'd really think that's a stat worth putting as much weight in as people do. Either way, it is the goal that ends up making the difference for the Kraken, getting his first ever back-to-back games with goals, and in general, just a fantastic game for really that pairing of he and Schultz, a pairing that kind of had a tough start to the season, but has really come on here pretty well in the last couple of games. Really, the entire Kraken D-core has had a pretty good start to the season, all things considered, and certainly at this point. And then the third star, Borgen was a mention that, yeah, again, the Kraken D-core has played pretty well. I could definitely get on board with Borgen as a third star, but ultimately I'm going to go with Eli Tolvanen. I feel like Tolvanen had a game where he could have easily had 2, heck, maybe even a hat trick worth of goals in this game. He clearly was a man on a mission to try to make his name known against his old team. Unfortunately, Saros was able to shut him down on every occasion that he sent the puck towards the net, but yeah, it's coming for Tolvanen. He had a fantastic game in this one, especially offensively. Anyway, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. As always, I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comment section below, who your 3 stars are, and just generally how we're feeling at this point in the season. Things starting to slowly turn around here for the Kraken. And until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken!